This week on Roundtable.
That shift, that medium shift from a comic book to a movie is as big a medium shift as dancing to reading.
Jackson Lanzing, co-writer of Grayson, Batman and Robin Eternal, and Hacktivist.
I would love to write a hockey Wolverine X-Men. Like that would be like my number one.
Cecil Castulucci, Eisner-nominated author of Odd Duck and Shade the Changing Girl.
You all need to come to like a kind of a creative meld because each aspect brings a full layer to the story you're telling.
Kurtis Wiebe, Eisner-nominated creator and writer of Rat Queens.
You know, I've turned down like co-writing with a celebrity, a young adult novel, or whatever, even though it would be so much money that I would be able to buy so many pants. Like there would be all
Pants
the pants.
factor, very high.
I would buy you pants.
Yes! Cecil pants! So I work with Colin Kelly, who I think is on other episodes of the show. So some of you have been on a show with him. So Colin and I have worked together straight out of college. We've been sort of a two-man squad for a while now. Oh, hey guys, check it out. That's exciting. We all copied you on the mimosa, it looks like.
Yeah.
This is exciting. So we work on. We came out of school as feature writers. We got repped at a big agency, and we were like, "Hey, we're gonna write movies." And wrote a lot of movies that no one made for 8 years, something like that. Like we've been doing it for a long time.
So very successful.
Oh, very successful. Yeah. Well, it's great. We've made a lot of money. We've done the thing where you like write the script and then you get a check for the script,
which is perfect.
I suppose it would be a little more perfect if somebody made the movie. And I think that's the battle of being a young feature writer is that there's like a very small handful of us who you can point to and be like, oh yeah, I've seen that movie, right?
Yeah.
But, which is one of the reasons that comics was so appealing. I was already into comics. I did a comics straight out of college, so I was kind of like playing around. But I dragged Colin into it the minute that I could. I think he jumped at the chance because it was an opportunity to actually see something that we'd written get made.
Primarily, I've done comics, and over the years, I've taken other side jobs because comics isn't always something you can rely on full time. Quite a few years ago, I wrote a indie game called Super Motherload, which is not a porn game. It sounds like it, I know, but it's basically a very simple digger game. And the studio was based out of Edmonton, Canada, and I knew a guy that was the main artist there, and he had reached out to write the story for it. And they basically said, like, do whatever you want. We want it to be like this kind of quasi 1950s future, and it's gonna have kind of an American versus like Russian feel to it. And so yeah, I wrote that, and that was an interesting experience writing for, it's a fairly scripted game, so it was fairly simple, I guess, because you just had to write in patches of dialogue, but I had to kind of build the world a little bit, which was pretty interesting. And then outside of that, I also worked at Microsoft Studio in Vancouver. They were called Black Tusk then. They're the Coalition. They did Gears of War. I worked for them for about 7 months, and that was really interesting because I'd never really worked on a big kind of budget game before, and so I was getting to write like cinematics and getting to like see the cinematics being shot and everything like that, and that was like a really interesting taste of something outside of comics that I really enjoyed, was like seeing the stuff that I had written and the dialogue being performed by actors, and that was the first time I'd ever had that because everything I'd done up until the point really was comics. And I have done some game writing. I actually, 2003 or 2004, my first paid writing gig was for a Fantasy Flight Games role-playing setting called Midnight, and which is basically they take the idea of Lord of the Rings and treat it as if Sauron got the ring and murdered the hobbits,
cool.
and so basically evil controls the world. Yeah,
evil wins. Yeah,
evil wins great.
Alternate history.
I think I got paid 2 cents a word. It was. I mean, I almost retired on that, but I thought I should stick it out for a little bit longer.
That was like my Ashes of Volcano paycheck. I was like, oh, this is awesome. This pays for a dinner.
Yeah.
It was great.
Hey, man, if art can buy you a sandwich.
I know.
Yeah, there you go.
Honestly.
It's like you can retire, you know? Like
Last year I had an experience of buying pants on comics money.
Yeah.
And I remember I think I like posted on Twitter. I was like, just bought all these pants with comics money. And I was like, I actually feel really proud of myself.
Yeah.
Like, you buy clothing with art money.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a
always
win.
exciting. So I started off, like I went to theater school and film school. And I thought I was going to become a film director. That's what I thought my whole life. But I got to college and I joined a punk rock band. So, you know, it became that was my first career. I put out a couple of CDs and toured America and Canada. You can hear my music on Spotify.
What's the band?
It was called Nerdy Girl because I was a nerdy girl and still am. I moved out to LA actually because my first album was coming out. And I started doing you know, performance art pieces, and I made a little film club where we would make a short film every 6 weeks.
That's cool.
And that's why I ended up doing my feature. And then the music industry kind of like, you know, fell apart and stuff. And so I started the second thing that I wanted to do, which was write novels, more specifically young adult novels. And my first book, it's called Boy Proof, and it's about a girl who's obsessed with comic books and post-apocalyptic science fiction films and monster makeup, you know, special effects makeup. And Shelley Bond at DC saw that and was like, hey, maybe you want to write some comics. And I was like, oh yeah, I totally do, because I'd been obsessed with comics. So then, you know, so I did novels, and I did the Plain Janes with DC, and then that led
that was where I first read.
That was your entree point?
That was my entree point on the Cecil train, 100%.
And so I did that, and I'd always wanted to write comics because I was doing all these things. This opera company in Canada asked me, they put together like choreographers and composers, and they were like, would you like to do something? And I was like, yes, I would like to do a live comic book opera. So then
But you didn't even have the idea, they just said, hey, do you
because they put people together, and
that's
and so they put me together with this composer, and we did a live comic book opera that has art by like Cameron Stewart and Pascal Gerard and Scott Hepburn and Michael Cho. Yeah, it was serious.
I love Scott.
Yeah, and so
he did an awesome cover for Joyride.
He was amazing. He did the science fiction part. So I did that, librettos, and so now we're actually doing our new one. As a good Canadian, it's a hockey noir opera, so it's hockey and noir. And
wow, so you were like the most Canadian.
Yeah.
You're like, what's the most Canadian thing we can possibly write?
I just leaned into it.
Yeah,
you know?
is it called A?
Yeah, no, it's called hockey opera.
Oh, all right.
It's very simple. How do you know when you're doing your own thing? Like, how do you know, like, oh, I want to do an indie comic with this, or I want to, or like that Rat Queens is like a, you know, why did you choose to do Rat Queens as a comic book rather than a live action CBC Canadian television show?
After school special.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, how do we choose when we're not doing license work? Because I mean, obviously, if I'm, you know, it's like
you're locked to medium and license work.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course.
You know, so
absolutely.
it's like, you know, or if you're doing a studio film, you're locked into like that. You know, they're asking you for this thing. But like when you're doing your heart song, your art heart is singing.
Yeah.
Like, how do you decide like what is what? Like,
I mean, we
like
couldn't.
The medium, you mean?
the medium.
So ZojaCon, the thing we're doing for Vault right now, super heart song. Love this book. Could not make it as a movie. No one would ever make it. No one would ever pay for it. It's not even worth writing the script because I know.
Did you start
the
idea
as a comic.
as a comic
It started
or as
as a
movie?
comic.
Okay.
No, it started as a comic. We knew immediately, and part of that was because we were playing with time in a way that would make it pretty impossible in a movie. It's got a Slaughterhouse-5 element of like being it's a character from our world who wakes up in a fantasy world. It's very like Labyrinth or Neverending Story. But she's like in her 40s, she's lived a whole life, and now she is unstuck in this period of time. So she's a mother who's like raised a kid and now gets a chance to raise a world. And she's getting that over millions of years of being able to influence time in this world. Telling that story in a feature would be such an uphill battle that it never even crossed my mind. Telling the story.
You didn't see it as television, or
no? Partially because I think doing it in TV again would have been budget prohibitive. She's the only person. The rest of the world is a CGI effect in that case, right? I can't shoot. I shoot it in the woods. It feels like it's not halfway to what the actual creative is, which is a weird world, a world of strange things, and she is the only thing that's familiar, right? So then it becomes okay. Well, we could do it as a novel, but then I kind of don't get the. As you put it, the silence of it. And part of the point of the book was like, we have one character all alone. So she better be able to like live in that world silently. And like, we better be able to observe her naturally. So comics, I guess, had all of the things that like checked off in the medium, but it wasn't an analytical process. We knew immediately it was a comic book, and we were like, oh, it's a comic.
I pretty much think in comics now. It's a weird thing where I'm not I don't default to anything else, but it's just like when I come up with a new concept, for me, it's immediately a comic because that's just where my head's at with stories.
I love novels. I mean, obviously, I
deeply
write novels.
admire
I have
that.
a lot of novels.
Yeah.
But I will say that, like, I wrote this one novel called The Year of the Beasts, and you know, I had this idea in my head, and I got to this point where something happens, and I realized that words are clumsy. So you know, the book is about grief and you know, jealousy and sisterhood and sort of rage, and I started writing the book, and I was like, you know, writing like, I'm so sad. I feel very sad. I'm really sad. Really, it was clumsy. It wasn't cutting. It wasn't like getting to the thing. And then I was like, oh, holy shit, I write comics. There's silence in comics. So then I decided that the book would be a hybrid novel where every alternating chapter is either prose or comic book.
Oh, cool.
And so that you have like these two separate stories that seem like they're not, you know, that they don't like you can read the prose, just one story, or the comics and just one story. But if you read it together, you get the whole story.
That sounds awesome.
And that book is with
that.
it's with Nate Powell, who's a genius.
Oh, awesome.
And but like that was like what comics sort of had given to me. I'd written the Plain Janes, I'd done these other things, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I can solve a narrative problem in my novel by using comics.
I sometimes test those ideas in games. If I have an idea that, I was going to say to you, maybe you should try that.
Maybe I should.
Because it's this thing where you can.
You guys gonna tabletop with me on that?
Anytime.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
anytime.
But that idea that if you have something that you have enough done in your mind that you just like, well, how would it work? How would the characters live in that world, and how would it feel? Throw some people that you know and that you can trust as storytellers to sit down and try a game and just like a little improv to see. And I've had stuff come out of sessions that have made it directly into the stuff that I've written.
What I've come to realize about stories is that I feel like when you meet an artist, right? They can have like they can go on a picnic and they could bring a little watercolors or pastels or charcoal, and how they draw the picnic kind of changes by what tool they're using, and that's how I feel about narrative. That's how I feel about stories. So it's like if I'm writing a song or a libretto or a play or a performance art piece or whatever, comic book, novel, picture book, it's sort of like which instrument are you picking up to tell that story in the more perfect way. I'm too punk rock, and I think having my first career being in an indie punk rock band in Canada, and get in a van, do it yourself, put on a show in a barn,
Right.
whatever, is that that's always been my sort of mentality. Oh, you don't want to do it? Well, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to do what I want to do. And if that means that two people like it, or it's me doing it with sock puppets, great. And if not, then but I feel like my job as an artist or as a storyteller is to protect my story. And so it's I want to do that. I mean, and maybe that's why I haven't done very much licensed work. I mean, with Shade, sure, that's a licensed character. I mean, it's a DC character.
But it's your take on Shade.
I get to do whatever I want. Me and Marley get to
That's a rarity.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's sort of
That's why I really want to work with Young Animal. They look awesome.
That's the path that I thrive in. And I think that you get better stories when you have people who are allowed to, storytellers, do what they do best. And I feel like, being in a punk rock band has helped sort of strengthen my core for that kind of stuff, where I'm just all art all the time, and I don't want to, I've turned down co-writing with a celebrity, a young adult novel, or whatever, even though it would be so much money that I would be able to buy so many pants. There would be all
Pants
the
factor,
pants.
very high.
I would buy you pants.
Yes, Cecil pants.
But the thing is that it's I remember taking the call for this one particular thing, and I had to do an interview. My agent was like, just do the interview. I was like, okay. So I did the interview, and I literally felt my skin crawling. I was just every molecule in my body was rebelling, and I was and I was crying to my agent afterwards. I was like, I can't do this.
Activist was amazing, and it was a great experience, and we had a really good time on it, and ultimately got to tell the story we wanted to tell. And that was actually the interesting thing, was that we'd worked with bigger names in movies and really rarely got to walk in and be like, this is what we're interested in.
Right.
And they said, great, me too.
Right.
But we walked in with Alyssa, and she had a pitch, and we said, yeah, but we'd like to take it over here? Can we change this thing? Can we take these two characters and take this one character, make them two characters, so we can make it a story about brotherhood, because that's what we're interested in writing about. And can we make the story about what is going on between like Western social media and Eastern actual revolution, like physical revolution? Can we talk about that distinction rather than just like doing the social network? And she was like, oh my God, that's all I want to talk about.
But see, that's
and let us loose on it.
But
you know?
then that's the sign of an artist, right? I mean,
Right.
it's like
I suppose that's the fair,
yeah,
right?
it's
Yeah.
like, you know, it's like anytime, it's like if you have somebody who's just like, oh, I want to write a YA novel, but I don't really, you know, I just want to do that. And
I want my name on a book.
Yeah, I want my name on a book, but
Yeah.
they don't really actually care about story, and they're not an artist. I mean, I don't know Alyssa Milano, but I've read her Twitters. She seems like she's pretty awesome.
She gives a shit.
Yeah, so it's like,
I think the collaboration with an artist actually is probably my favorite thing about comics, because
it's like being in a band.
It
That's
is.
what I
It
say.
is.
It's
Yeah.
like being in a band.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, that's what I was telling Gerard about this. Like, you know, and he was like, yes, oh my God, Cecil, you're so right. It's like being in a band and you're jamming and you're writing songs together. There's just this flow when it works really well that is just extraordinary. It's true art. And then when you get to do a comic book with an extraordinary artist, you know, extraordinary colorist, like it's just the jamming that
you all
happens
need to
with that.
come to like a kind of a creative meld, because each aspect brings a full layer to the story you're telling.
One of the things that I love about writing comics as opposed to prose or a song or anything like that, or an opera, is that you can have this moment where you know, you just sit for a second and you let the, you know, oftentimes when I get my pencils back from any artist that I'm working with, and they've all been amazing, I'm like, oh, I'm going to throw out all my words.
We do the same.
Yeah.
We
It's
do
like,
the same.
why do I need words?
I think it should be kind of, you have the script as an outline, what you want to happen, and then once that art comes in, that is their interpretation of what that script is. And then you go over, and again, like you said, you will rewrite the dialogue. I've had, large sections where, especially because with Rat Queens, it's a comedy book for the most part, there are so many times throughout that series with all the different artists I've worked on with it that the panel sells the joke entirely, and I take the punchline out
Absolutely.
every
Yeah.
time. And that's the beautiful thing about working with an artist that can especially do comedic timing, is you can just remove it and let the expression or the scene just hit that joke. And I love that. I love if I can take that out, because for me that is the best part about the collaborating, is when you have those moments where you're like, this is the scene as I intended it, but it's always elevated.
It makes you very, very good at pitching.
Yeah.
Because when somebody asks you, like we were telling the story out in the lobby, we'll tell it again, like we just did a story for the Wonder Woman annual. They asked us like, hey, you want to write some Wonder Woman stories? We're like, a million times yes, please let us write Wonder Woman. And I was like, and we wrote, you know, a million Wonder Woman stories. And it took us 6 hours. It was 6 hours of just like talking about Wonder Woman, and that's where all of our pitches came from. And that's not because we don't have time to do more of that, though we don't. But it was more because like,
Because you've trained that muscle.
you've trained the muscle
Right.
in your brain to never get too attached to anything, but also recognize like the infinite possibility of the space.
See, I feel like that's exciting and sad.
I feel you. No, I really do. I get it, and and you have to check against it when you're doing stuff you really care about.
I only want to write stories that I want to write,
Yeah.
you know, and so it's like I only I don't want to be sort of. Excuse me, sorry.
At 7 now
I
she's
don't
on?
want to be.
7,
I don't want
roughly?
to be boxed in. I don't want to be boxed into writing something that I think is mediocre just because I wanted to get a job,
Of
or
course
because,
not. Yeah.
or
Of course
because I
not.
want to get some pants. You know, I
Absolutely.
mean, like it
Yeah.
goes back to that. You know, sometimes I'm extremely poor. I don't know about you guys.
Oh, we're always-
and it's
yeah.
very, very stressful sometimes because I think to myself, well, if I were to write a book like this, then I could eat and have pants and, you know, pay my rent and not live in a cardboard box.
I'll tell you the story about the Marvel thing that I did. It was for a Christmas annual, and they were basically like, okay, we need 5 ideas. It was like they used to do them. I don't think they do them anymore, but you have to come up with 5 ideas to pitch us as a Christmas themed story. And so I had 4 really good ones. Like I was really happy with 4 of them. I couldn't figure out the 5th slot. The 4th one was like this really dark and dour Christmas story about Wolverine is caught during the Vietnam War, and he's in a pit trap next to a guy, and they're talking about home and what Christmas means, and at the end Wolverine gives him the gift of freedom, and he breaks them all out, and I was like, that's the one I want to do, right? No, they didn't like that one.
I just got chills with that.
The
one.
last one was, I was just like, oh shit. I mean, I guess I'm Canadian. I could do something like funny. So I basically was like, I don't know. Wolverine and the X-Men play hockey, and that was literally the concept. And I'm like, I just threw it in at the last second, and that's the one that they picked.
But see, I would love to write a hockey Wolverine X-Men like that. That would be like my number one. I'd be like, yes.
I've had an interesting experience with Rat Queens. I was working with Adam Koebel on adapting the comic into a role-playing game, and I had this very simple idea of just like, just kind of put a Rat Queen skin on D&D. And Adam is a master game designer, and he would just sit there and talk to me about like, well, what's Rat Queens about? And it was honestly like the first time where I had to sit there and really deconstruct what I thought the story was about, so that he could just take that and make mechanics. And it was a really interesting where just to watch that transition, because I have an idea of what the story is, but I had to really dig down and we would have to answer questions like, well, like, are weapons important in this world? Like, is your gear and your equipment, is that actually something that is going to have an effect on the game? And then I'm like, thinking about the comic book, I'm like, well, not really. Like, sometimes they have one weapon, sometimes they have another. It's not really super important. He's like, well, what's battle about then? Is it about their friendship as a team? Is it does it have a psychological effect? Does it create kind of drama and like sadness? Like, what is battle about? I'm like, well, it's exciting. It's kind of just like intense, and it's like they can move on after it like nothing happened. And he's like, okay. And so he would design all these interesting rules so that it was not just a skin of a D&D game, but it was entirely its own thing with like, you not only play a character, but your character is there's a separate character sheet that is your team, and that they can work together or they can work against each other. If you fulfill your own goals, then your team character sheet will take damage. And this kind of idea that translating it, I just thought it'd be simple. I thought it'd be like, it's just you inject the humor in, and then but it turned out to be a really interesting experience, because I had to deconstruct what I thought Rat Queens to be on every level.
When you went back to Rat Queens afterwards as like a comics writer, did you find that your understanding of, say, combat in Rat Queens changed having had those conversations, or was it kind of just like putting it back on instinct and you're like, okay, now I always knew what this was and I know what it is now?
I mean, it was good because around that time too, I took a year off of the series, and we came back with kind of a soft reboot, but it was in that period where I was deconstructing everything, like, hey, what do I love about this series, and what do all these things mean? And so, like, for the combat stuff, it was just kind of a reaffirmation that it's this kind of, fun, exciting, over the top adventure, and it was kind of a centralizing thing for me that I could refocus to understand at the very core what it was that the reason I set out at the beginning to write the series. And so it was like kind of like fortuitous that I was working on that at the same time, because it allowed me to kind of just refocus and understand what Rat Queens is. And it's, as creators, it's easy to kind of get to maybe lose the voice, or to like lose where you're going with what it is you're working on. And sometimes you need that course correction. In the case of Rat Queens, it happened to be trying to make it into a game.
With Rat Queens, like it's like that's a very flexible story, right? And and it's as a comic book, but you're, maybe going to be doing it as other kinds of things. Like how, do you have room for that? Would you want to be involved with that? Like, if somebody took your story, would you be okay with letting go?
It's funny because over the years, I've had quite a few different things that have been approached by like Hollywood, like movies and TV. So a series I worked on called Grim Leaper, which I wrote after my divorce, and it was kind of about me going into the dating field again after being with someone since I was like 19, and I was 30 now, and I went to dating. So the whole concept of Grim Leaper is, it's this guy named Lou who has this curse that he dies in like horrific, over-the-top, Final Destination style ways, and he wakes up in the body of a new person over and over and over again.
Nice.
But then he meets a girl who also has that same curse, so it's like a horror romantic comedy.
That's cool.
I just like doing weird genre smash-ups. But there are certain things that I'd be like, with that Grim Leaper, I'm totally fine with somebody just kind of doing their own take on it. Another series, Peter Panzerfaust, which is like the Peter Pan story retold in World War II. That one I'm like happy with just kind of people taking it and doing their own take on it. But Rat Queens is a little bit different because it's like, for me, it's a personal. I'm really tied to the characters, and it's something that I would like to be involved in, because not only that, it's just like not just like whatever film or TV, whatever, but working on a role-playing game too, like on the side, and finding how that is so different from any other like games that I've played. And I like having my hands in those things, that being involved with that one in particular, but other stuff I can let go.
If anybody wanted to make any of my novels or my comics into a thing, I think I wrote it the way that I wanted to write it. Like if I had wanted to write, the Plain Janes or, Tin Star or whatever as a movie, I would have done that as a movie, or I would have, even though I don't write film scripts or, I've been like, all right, now I'm going to do this. But so I feel like what I would want is for the person who is going to take it to take me out for a beer and like talk to me about it, because I would want them to like preserve the heart, because I understand that when it goes to another medium that you have to gut the thing in order to keep it true. I always get really frustrated when I see a translation of a book into film and it's like every single beat is there. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
Boring,
Exactly. It becomes mechanical.
Yeah.
It's funny. So I'm of the opinion that if I was to be able to write like an adaptation for Joyride or whatever, right? If I wanted to take those things and go and do that, it would be really important, I think, for me that we didn't direct it, that we were in no way involved in like ultimately the point of doing that medium shift is that there's a medium shift, and that somebody who's great at that medium comes in and really kills it in that medium.
Well, and
you know what I mean?
is able to kill the things that you might not be able to kill.
Exactly. And so like I'm really excited about Zojicon. Zojicon's like I think could make a really killer movie now that it's been built as a book, but the movie would not be the book. And I'm not really the person to write the movie, I don't think. Like maybe, we might like do a pass.
How do you know when that is the case? Like that's
you don't. Instinct. Writer's instinct, right? You look at the thing and you're like, for me, honestly, the biggest thing is Zojicon is a female-driven story. It's about motherhood. I would really love a writer who has authentic experience with that.
Right.
That isn't me. Because I have stuff to say about that. I was raised by a single mother. I have so with Colin, we really like motherhood stories. We seek them out a lot.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot of experience with it vicariously. But I would probably want like a female creative team to come in and kick ass on Zojicon, because they would be able to ID stuff and bring stuff through a lens that, as the writer of the book, I would not be able to do. Yeah. I try to be aware of that in medium shifts, because like I'm out there, as you put it, to tell the story I want to tell. If I wanted to write it as a movie, I would have. That medium shift from a comic book to a movie is as big a medium shift as dancing to reading, right? Like these are two different activities. These are two things
people
that
make the assumption that they are exactly the same, because in theory there's a similar layout. You've got your storyboards, you've got the dialogue, it's all there. Theoretically, but it's not that simple at all.
But the pacing is different, and the reason a person reads is different, and how a person reads is different, and how they pull it in. And dialogue that'll work on the page will never work in a movie.
Yeah.
And dialogue that works in a movie will never work on the page. The amount of acting that you can get out of a drawing versus the amount of acting you can get out of a person, they are distinct no matter how good the artist is, right? Or no matter how good the actor is. Like, it goes both ways.
But the thing that's been really interesting is that what I thought, like you're saying, is like what I thought was going to be, so I thought I was going this way. It's like the constant flexibility of doing an ongoing, where the story, you are growing with the story, and the story is growing with you, which is very different than doing a novel. I will say that Supe Leaves Home, which is it's like about hobos, Depression era hobo historical fiction. I wrote that in 2008. That's when I came up with the idea, and that's when I started writing it. And it came out of directly of like a trauma that happened in my life. And it was like I couldn't figure out a way forward in my life. And everyone was very worried about me. And then I just thought, like, I could become a hobo. Like, hobos, they just left. And like, everything was fine. And that kind of allowed me to move forward in my own life by writing this story. So story as a sort of lifeline. But then it took it didn't come out until 2 weeks ago. So it took like,
congrats, by the way.
like 9 years for that story to come out. Meanwhile, I'd been like rewriting it and working on it, and what it started out as when I first started writing it to what it became was very, very different. And that didn't have to do with the, the fact that it was like a one and done, but the fact that the story had time to like mull like a fine wine.
Tricks, the OGN I was talking about, right? That project, haven't announced it yet, and I just announced it, but whatever. No one knows what it is. Tricks, it's a mystery. But the cool thing about Tricks is that it did go through that exact same process where like I started writing it in my 20s out of necessity. It was literally like a story about Colin and I were going through stuff in our lives as like young men who were trying to be better than we were, and like trying to understand our instincts and our behaviors, and why we made decisions that made us unhappy and made the people around us unhappy, and how we were transitioning out of that into something else ideally, and just using it as a way to like talk about being a like clueless, entitled young guy, and trying to make ourselves better as a result. That is not what the book is. Now, you read the book now, you'll get a little bit of that out of the first act, because that's kind of what we were thinking about at the time. But like, the book is now a much larger meditation about a lot of different stuff that now that we've sort of come through that period, and now we're looking at ourselves a little bit differently, and are looking back at that period a little differently with maybe a little bit more context and a little more understanding. And the whole shift of it has happened. And now so sort of I can recognize the emotional fragments, I guess, in it of what we set out to do, but found an entirely new story in being forced to wait.
And I think that's like one of the things that's really interesting is that like when you have the time to do a serialized story, you have the time to grow with the story and let the story grow with you. But then there's also the pleasure of having a story be written when it wants to be written rather than just writing it because you got to like get it done or whatever. And it's like, so time is kind of different in those like two kind of things. Let's fucking toast to motherfucking having the time and stories.
To stories that know when they want to be written.
Exactly, yeah.
Cheers.